Okay, so I wanted to offer some of the highlights of what people can expect on the nervous system work journey. Um, this is something that it seems that everybody goes through in a pretty similar order. Uh, Definitely, this shows up when people are being supported with the SSP, the Safe and Sound Protocol, but it seems to follow this same trajectory even without the listening modality. And that's because it's very related to the way that the polyvagal theory describes the mechanism of the autonomic nervous system. And this is very well described with the um, autonomic ladder, which I have a nice slide here to share with you that is from Deb Dana, who has a beautiful book on these concepts called Anchored. I'll put the link in the description. So the polyvagal stands for three circ or poly, more than one, vagal, vagus nerve. So there's three circuits of the vagus nerve as described by Dr. Porges, and those are dorsal, sympathetic, and ventral. So this ladder helps us to understand that we can only move between these states or circuits of the vagus nerve in this order. So you can either go from dorsal to sympathetic to ventral, or you can go from ventral to sympathetic to dorsal. You can only go up and down the ladder in this order. You can't go from dorsal to ventral without moving through sympathetic, is the main point. Okay. So, a great analogy for this is like when we wake up in the morning. We're coming out of a dorsal, which is rest and digest. When it's safety, a dorsal that's based in safety, that's rest and digest, which is often happening in sleep, not always. Um, so when we're in a rest and digest dorsal, we're going to wake up and we're going to have a bit of a sympathetic burst to help us to get out of bed. Many of us are in more of a fight flight because we use an alarm. So we're in a true rest and digest, and then we hear like rah, 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 and we fight flight. Um, a more gentle approach is natural waking, which can use just the mobilized energy. You might see a cat waking up, starting to stretch, or a baby waking up, starting to stretch. Often babies will start to sing to themselves or vocalize as a way to mobilize themselves. And then eventually you're going to be moving into your social engagement by greeting others around you, connecting with others. So that's a real beautiful example of how this autonomic ladder works. And the nervous system work often uh, reflects this autonomic ladder by giving us more experiences of moving from dorsal to sympathetic to ventral over the course of the work. So let me stop this, and I'm going to talk us through what those tend to look like. So often in the beginning of nervous system work, I tend to end up with people who are experiencing what a lot of people call functional freeze. So they're spending a lot of time feeling pretty disconnected from their bodies, maybe having spikes of mobilization, like spikes of irritation. But I'd say the majority of the people who I end up connecting with are experiencing a pretty flat disassociation and are calling it functional freeze. Many folks in our culture, based on having an external authority, have been trained or punished into staying in a dorsal state, a shutdown state. Dorsal reflects when the threat is more powerful than us. We're going to be in dorsal. And that's how, cross of planning or however else you want to describe our current society is based on external authority, and we need to like be less powerful than the external authority in order for that system to function. So people often come to the work feeling pretty disconnected from their bodies, often dealing with constipation, sort of like chronic fatigue, chronic pain, not a lot of movement in their life, not a lot of creativity, feeling like they're kind of dragging themselves through life. Okay. So at the beginning of the work, we're really starting to connect with the body, starting to wake up that connection. We're starting to notice how much of our life is us pushing the body through the different to-do lists that we have. We're starting to realize how strong those messages are, and the work is inviting us to listen to the messages that are like, I'm exhausted. I need to rest. I don't want to do this anymore. And that can feel very painful and triggering because it can feel like, as I invite you to slow down, even in sessions, it can feel like confronting to those parts of us that have been surviving through hustling, through achievement, through pushing. And it can feel kind of threatening to have me invite you into a slower pace. Um, and those parts of us that have survived based off of the worker bee energy, striving, pushing, can feel a little disrespected. And it can feel like I'm saying you don't have to do anything in this life. It can also feel scary. Like if I listen to my body, I'm never going to get back up. I'm never going to do anything. And I'm just going to like end up, without resources and without housing. It can feel very scary. So the beginning of the work is usually a bit of like a please don't tell me this. It can feel really confrontational to consider listening to a body that may be communicating like I'm really tired and I need some rest. So that tends to happen in the, first chunk of sessions. And when people are doing the listening, it's like hour one and two of the SSP are just really coming into acknowledgement of that part of us that's been pushing for so long, how painful that's been, how tired the body is, and the psyche, and how do we really feel about considering slowing down and moving into a pace that's more respectful of our animal bodies, and what might end up being given up as a result of that. So it can be fairly uncomfortable. And then in the next phase, once we've moved through just sort of reconciling with this idea of moving from a striving into a ease, we can have a lot of mobilization start to come up, that sympathetic energy that was in the middle of the ladder. So we're feeling really threatened about coming out of our cave, so to speak, and then we start coming out of the cave as we start to test the waters. And all of a sudden, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually really angry about a lot of stuff. I'm irritated about a lot of stuff. And that can feel also very threatening. And it can be very easy if we open that up too quickly for us. For our nervous system to be like, whoop, that's super not safe. Let's go back into the cave, back into dorsal. And so we move very cautiously into exploring what that mobilization feels like in the body. The models that we're given for mobilization in our society are all around aggression and passive aggressiveness. And so they can feel like we're being mean, we can be irritable, we can be angry, we can be passive aggressive, and it can feel very unspiritual to a lot of us that have experienced, spiritual through the lens of religious authority that wants to keep us in dorsal, disempowered, and not communicating our our mobilized, it, not expressing our mobilization, because mobilization is what is required to make any changes and to take any action. And so, in an external authority-based system, mobilization is very threatening. So we move cautiously into mobilization. It can feel a little overwhelming into the body. I am going to start to encourage you to offer extra gentle movement, not exercise, because exercise can often be kind of keep us stuck, like an exercise in the sense of like hustle exercise. Can keep us a little stuck in sympathetic, but gentle mobilization, like very slow walking or um, stretching, Tai Chi, rocking like I'm doing right now, slow dancing, those kind of things. So as I will invite you, as I see you moving into more mobilized energies, to offer more gentle movement per day. Often offering to try that in the evenings before bed, as you're having more mobilization come up. And then the other piece to effective mobilization is assertive communication. So I am likely to offer some study and exploration of what assertive communication looks like, which can be really hard to find information on it because we don't have models or examples of assertive communication in our families or in the media. Um, in books, radio, podcasts, movies, there's really no model of assertive communication. Our culture does not celebrate it. And we see tons of models of aggressive, passive aggressive, and passive. Very easy to find those in songs, in books, in children's stories, in movies, in television shows. But assertive is very different from all of those, and it can be very hard to find examples of. Many of us have not experienced it from anyone else, let alone tried it ourselves. So, my favorite resource for that is this book, How to Be an Adult by David Richo. And studying this book can be really helpful in beginning to try out assertive communication, knowing that it's not necessarily going to be well received by the people around you. So, that can be a very effective way to start to move up that ladder towards ventral using the mobilization of the sympathetic for those things that are meaningful to us, to take those actions and make those changes and voice those thoughts that are important to us. Um, and so that tends to happen, sort of in the middle of the nervous system work, often during hour 2 or 3 of the Safe and Sound protocol. And then as we move into ventral, after going through that mobilized phase, we come into what, and actually, I want to share also this map of consciousness from Sir David Hawkins that really is, I want to make an image actually that puts the autonomic ladder on top of this map of consciousness because they have so much to do with each other and the overlap is really nice. But as we move up the ladder, we're also moving up these frequencies of consciousness that he outlined really clearly. So we have the dorsal down here, the fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. That's where we're kept by a, cross of planning energy, external authority energy. And then as we move up into the sympathetic, we get desire, stress, anger, pride, courage, that's where that assertive communication starts to become really helpful. When we stay down in anger, stress, desire, we can bump ourselves back down into dorsal very easily. But when we start to use assertive communication based off of that pride of our sense of self-worth and the courage to take a risk, to take the action or voice the information that is coming through us, then that continues to mobilize us up into ventral. And as we get up into ventral, many people at the first experiences of ventral can feel rather dull or even somewhat like depression. When we get up into ventral, we're often going to also start experiencing some of that true rest and digest, which is the safety-based dorsal. And most of us have associated dorsal with feeling really stuck, that fear-based shutdown dorsal, and we haven't had a lot of rest digest, and they sort of have a similar flavor because they're both dorsal. So we can be like, oh my gosh, am I depressed? Am I bored? We can also, as we move out of that big surge of sympathetic, we can be missing those floods of hormones that come, stress hormones that come with sympathetic. And those are addictive, and we get dopamine when we get the cortisol. So we can start to just feel like when we get into this neutrality, willingness, and acceptance into the beginning stages of ventral, we can feel like a little apathetic. It can feel a little reminiscent of depression. We can get a little worried, like, wow, I did all this work and now I'm just sort of like, what? It's kind of boring or like depressing. What's this? And that tends to happen like, you know, sort of it's the third stage of things when you're going through the nervous system work, and when you're doing the listening alongside it, it can tend to come up around hour 3 or 4. And this is just us sort of recalibrating to the absence of drama and the absence of the stress chemicals that are very addictive that come with a lot of that chaos and drama. Um, And again, not a lot of media examples of people experiencing acceptance, willingness, neutrality. You could listen to like talks by Thich Nhat Hanh, and you can kind of pick up on this. Like it's like very slow, it's not very showy, it's not very exciting. You gotta sort of like, it's almost boring, but it's like really meaningful. Um, so yeah, that starts to happen as we sort of shift out of the excitement of a chaotic nervous system. And then what tends to come next is some of these frequencies around as we move uh, from the sympathetic with all this courage into the neutrality, willingness, acceptance, and reason, we can start to feel inspired and start to have curiosity and interest and energy for things that feel really meaningful to us. But it is not the kind of energy that's like frenetic, like adrenaline fueled energy that a lot of us experience um, when we're not in ventral. So it instead of a like, oh my gosh, I've got to do it. I'm so excited. It becomes like a, you know what, this feels like really nice to me and interesting. And it's more of a sustainable kind of energy because it doesn't have a big, um, like a big spark and then it dies down. It's more long lasting, and that's the kind of thing that I think people like Einstein and Tesla and a lot of the early inventors really were in a ventral space because they had a lot of um, courage. But they also had a lot of neutrality. So they were willing to just fail and fail and fail and fail, and they still were interested and curious enough. They had so much willingness and acceptance around it, but they had this really pure reason that I love. That reason is right next to love here and acceptance, because this reason is like, no, this is an important reason for me to be doing this. I feel like I really feel connected to this in a way that the failures are not going to stop me from doing it, and the success is not the reason why I'm doing it. It's like um, if you know people that just, love their cat, they are going to take really good care of their cat and spend time with their cat, not because they're getting any external success from that or because the cat is like praising them. It's just because they really feel like that is in a sustainable way, like something that they feel enough energy and motivation for in an ongoing way. What's another example? Like people who have personal gardens and they just do it for the pure satisfaction of it. For me, it's like this YouTube channel. I really enjoy making these videos. Hardly anybody watches them, right? A lot of them nobody watches, but it's very meaningful to me, and I don't feel like the success or failure of it has anything to do with the energy for it. Um, I just have a reason to do it that's bigger than that than success or failure. And I think that's where like love and joy and peace come in, right? Because I just love it. Ask me why I love it. I don't know. I love it, and it brings me joy and it brings me peace too. I feel like my body relaxes and I can sort out thoughts that I have, and there's a lot of energy for it, but it's not a like frenetic, like adrenaline, like jittery coffee energy. It's just like a um, enjoyment energy. So that shift into being like connecting with things that really are meaningful to you in a sustainable way tends to come towards the end of the work. And it's really fun to be in that part with people because they start to get ideas of activities or endeavors that would bring more meaning to their life. Um, when that can be very difficult, if not impossible, to connect with when we're down in a functional freeze. So that's always a very sweet part of it. And with the listening, that tends to come more around hour 4 or 5 or during the integration period. So, anyways, I just wanted to offer that. It's always difficult to explain that upfront to people. And then as it happens, I'm like, yeah, this is a part of what happens. And people are always like, really? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, it's very consistent and it follows this map of consciousness. It follows this autonomic ladder, and it's a very sweet, joy-filled journey for me to be a part of. So lots of love and talk to you again soon.